Hey, this is Jake, and this is a general movement guide for speedrunning Donkey Kong Bananza. Even though this game has just came out, we've already found a whole bunch of techniques and skips that are being used right now in the 80% speedrun. I will note this video will contain some very minor spoilers for the game. Also, every single technique we talk about will have a timestamp in the description below, so you can go back and forth to whatever you're looking for. With that being said, let's get into it. So, the very first technique we're going to talk about is roll jumping. So, whenever you press ZL on the controller, DK is going to do this roll like this. Now, you could just chain these rolls, and this is pretty fast. It's actually faster to jump immediately after rolling. You can actually even hit ZL and jump at the same time, and that will do a roll jump, like this. And this just as base DK, not holding anything, just moving around. This is the fastest way he can move. Now, we can take this one step further by implementing what's called a punch stall. So when you're in the air, DK will actually stall in the air when you punch, just like this. See, he kind of like hangs in the air a little bit. So if you combine roll jumping and punch stalling, like this, you can kind of conserve that ground momentum a little bit while you're in the air. And this just means that you have to roll jump less. They're pretty much the exact same speed from what I've timed, but obviously punch stalling after the roll jump makes it a little bit easier. Okay, and now we're going to talk about the bread and butter, which is turf surfing. Turf surfing is the fastest way to move around, again, as base DK when you're going downhill or on flat surfaces. And all you have to do it, you should probably know the game teaches you how to do this. You just pick up a chunk, hold ZL, and just mash Y. And this will just be pretty much the fastest way to move. Now, there are some different techniques we can implement alongside this. So, one good one is if you ever need to kind of maintain the durability on your chunk, you can see while you're turf surfing it does break. If there's ever a time where you need it to break slower, all you need to do is jump immediately after surfing. Like this. And this will help maintain the durability on it so that it breaks slower. Now, another really important technique to learn is called surf canceling, or ZL tapping, whatever you want to call it. All you have to do is when you're holding a chunk, you just jump and then double tap ZL very quickly. And this will give you a speed boost in the air. It even gives you a speed boost on the ground, but that's obviously a little bit less useful. Now, surf canceling will come into play a little bit later once we start talking about gap jumping. But this is a very, very important technique to get down. Thankfully, it's super easy. Literally, all you're doing is you're just double tapping ZL very quickly. ZL, 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 ZL. Now we're going to talk about climbing. Climbing in this game is a little bit weird. You know, the easiest way to climb is just hold up. It's fairly fast. You're not really going to lose that much time if you climb like that. However, it is a little bit faster to actually tap jump as you're climbing. So you don't want to mash. If you mash jump while you're climbing, he's going to get locked out of jumping and he's going to slow down. So I'll show you what I mean. This is me mashing. See how we jumped real slow? That's bad. What you want to do instead is you want to time your jumps as you're going up. So when you jump, you see how DK's hands go back on the wall? That's when you want to time your jump. So you'll just time your jumps all the way up. Just like that. And that's a little bit faster than climbing normally. Now, it's not always the best way to climb. So, for example, on this wall over here, if I try doing that all the way up this wall, he's going to start just bashing his head into the wall for some reason. Now, I'm not entirely sure why this happens. I think it's when there's something nearby, like maybe this fossil is causing it. But it also happens sometimes when there's like a ledge. He will just completely slow down and he will just bash his head in the wall and not refuse to jump. So that's what I mean when I say it's not always the best way to climb. So you'll want to kind of understand the route, know where you're climbing, and know what's the best where you're at, if that makes sense. And now we're going to talk about the next technique, which is gap jumping. Now, gap jumping is very, very important to the speedrun at the moment. Most of our skips involve some level of gap jumping of various difficulty. To show you here, I'll be showing you the canyon gap jump. This skips the entire layer by jumping over to this floating island over here. So I'll show you how that works. Now, basically, all gap jumping really is just combining all the previous techniques we've learned. So we'll talk about surf canceling, we'll talk about punch stalling. In some cases, we'll even talk about the higher double jump. For this one, though, all we really need to know is surf canceling and punch stalling. And to do so, here's what we're going to do. I'll show it first, and then I'll explain what's going on. There we go. So, as you can see, you might be able to tell, it's just a combination of everything we've learned so far. So we're going to ZL tap, punch stall with the rock, jump out of the rock, punch stall, roll. And we're actually doing something a little weird with that roll, you might have noticed. We're rolling with the punch, if that makes sense. So rather than just rolling, we're doing roll punches. I don't know if we're entirely sure why, but punch rolling is just better than regular rolling when we're trying to grab this ledge. I'll show this with just a regular roll. It just, for whatever reason, doesn't work. You can see I don't get nearly enough distance. So maybe it's the fact that his hands like reach out further. I'm not really sure. But we want to make sure we're doing the roll punch there. And to do a roll punch, all you have to do is roll and press Y. So we'll do it again. I'll show it. So we're gonna surf cancel, punch stall, jump, punch stall, roll punch. Just like that. This one's actually not hard at all. It's pretty simple as long as you're just spacing everything out properly. You don't want to do everything in too quick of succession, otherwise you'll end up too short. So I can show that. You can see if I do it all way too quick, I don't get anywhere near where I'm supposed to be going. I want to make sure we're spacing everything out a little bit. Now, another useful technique for gap jumping involves the ostrich. So in the 80% speedrun currently, all we unlock is glide level 1, which is important for some gap jumps, but the stuff in here doesn't technically require it. So we're going to talk about flutter stalling. So it's super, super simple to do. So whenever you're in the air as ostrich, all you have to do is mash ZL and punch, like this. And this just lets you get a little bit more distance out of your flutter. I do have glide 1 unlocked. Not required to do flutter stall, but it's super useful. I'll show in a second. I gotta refill my meter really quick. Okay, so we can combine flutter stalling with gap jumping to be able to get to cover a ton of distance. So, for example, if I want to get to this platform over there, maybe I probably would not reach that with regular BK, but if I were to use ostrich, we'll do the regular gap jump techniques, and then we'll flutter stall. And you can see we just get a ton of distance by doing that. It's super useful for a ton of stuff in this game, so definitely something you want to get figured out. Now there's even more we can actually do with ostrich, but first I want to talk about snake. Snake also has some pretty cool movement techniques we can do involving the snake triple jump. This one's pretty simple. We'll just pick up a chunk, charge a jump, charge a double jump, and then do another jump like that. You can actually charge all 3 of these jumps if you do it correctly. It's a little bit tricky. Like that. And you can just get a really, really high jump. Now, where flutter stalling comes into use here is where we can then switch to ostrich after that triple jump. And then as you can see, we can get a ton of height and then a ton of distance on top of that. So that is super useful for crossing huge gaps. And it's also useful for gaining a lot of height. Okay, so another technique I want to talk about is how to make these tunnel sections quicker. So there's a lot of them in this game, you may have noticed. And at first we thought they were just auto-scrollers, so you just have to hold the down punch. However, we found a way to save around 3 seconds. And 3 seconds is an estimate off one of these tunnels. It saves maybe 45 seconds throughout the duration of the run. Okay, so when we're going down into a tunnel like this, which hopefully this works, I haven't even tried this after beating the level. Okay, yeah. So we're gonna hold down punch, and you see how the screen starts zooming in like that? That's when we want to let go of B and then start holding it again. So whenever the screen flashes, let go, press again. And this is faster. Also, you have to be careful. Obviously, you don't want to hit anything. And how this works is we're just basically chaining that little speed boost you get from the start of the down punch. And that makes this section just a little bit faster. Now, something I want to talk about now is getting a high double jump. So this area in the divide is a very good example of where it's very useful. You can see if I try to do just a regular double jump here, I don't make it up. Like this. However, what you can do is you can press A or B, depending on your controls, to throw the chunk down. And if you jump right after you start throwing, like that, you get a much higher double jump. So on this section, for instance, you can just clear that quite easily. Now, I also want to talk about the fastest way to deal damage and the fastest way to dig. So, for example, if we wanted to destroy this little gold statue right here, we might punch it. That's fine. You can go run around and punch these. The fastest way to dig, deal damage, whatever, is to do roll punches like this. What this allows you to do is chain multiple hits together with the roll punch. So I'll show up in the dirt up here, actually. So, if we were digging normally, it would look like this. Not super slow, but also not super fast. If we instead do roll punches, you can see we go through much quicker. And this is useful for basically every single boss fight as well. Rather than doing regular punches, or even the charge punch as Kong Bananza, it is just better to do roll punches like this. It's faster, it allows you to chain more hits together, which in turn does more damage over time. Alright, so the next thing I want to show, this is not useful in any percent. It may be useful at some point, maybe in another category. And the reason why it's not useful is because it requires the spin jump, which is a skill we don't currently unlock, just because getting 2 skill points is very slow. Okay, so to do this, you'll spin, jump, and then you want to bounce against the wall and hold away from it. And as you can see, it kind of gives you a lot of speed in the opposite direction of where you bounced. Just hit the wall, hold away. Now, this is another way to do that canyon layer skip that I showed earlier, but once again, 2 skill points, it's quite a bit, and it's quite slow. So it's not really used for 90% right now. And that's pretty much it. Hopefully I didn't miss anything. If I did, let me know. Maybe I'll make a follow-up video with some other stuff, especially because I'm sure more things will be found. The game came out like less than a week ago, so I'm sure there will be a lot of new stuff that will be discovered. But yeah, hope this helps. If you found this through YouTube, I'll leave a link down in the description below to the Donkey Kong Bananza speedrunning Discord if you're interested in that kind of thing. Other than that, you can check me out on Twitch. I'm doing any percent runs of this probably right now if you click. But yeah, thanks for watching.